On today's episode, I speak to Cyndie Kramer, and Cyndie is so interesting. I loved our conversation. She has an ancestral healing and coaching practice, and this is something she got into at midlife because she was investigating her own family. And she provided me with a wonderful summary. So I am just going to read what she sent to me because it's so perfect as an intro. After turning 40, she felt like something needed to change in her life. While on the surface, I had a great life, I still felt like something inside of me was missing. It was learning about my family history, particularly the women, that led me to the process of healing my deepest emotional wounds. After learning the things the women in my family went through in their lives and the emotional wounds they must have suffered, I understood how those wounds were passed down and manifested in me. I came to understand the deep connection that existed between their lives and my own emotional and spiritual well being. And as I let go of the patterns of the past that no longer served me, I felt like my whole life was transformed. This work has had such a profound impact on my own life. I just had to find a way to help other women know and understand this. So I went on to become trained in a variety of life coaching and healing modalities. In 2020, Cyndie began offering ancestral healing and coaching to help other women release the unresolved family patterns that have been holding them back from living fully. So she helps you identify and remove behavioral patterns that you've inherited through your ancestors. It's crazy stuff. I love it. We talk about some good books that if you're interested in this, you can read about. But it was just a great conversation. And she's got some stuff coming, I think, in a couple of months that are going to be really, really fun. And so I'll bring her back on. We talked about like learning a little bit more about chakras. I don't know if you know what they are, but I'd love to learn more about them myself. So yes, as I continue to explore my own spiritual path and journey, I just love talking to people like her who are more experts on these subjects. So I hope you enjoy the episode. And here's Cyndie. Welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Lives. And with me today, I have Cyndie Kramer, who is an ancestral energy healer and coach who empowers women in midlife to find their voice and finally start saying yes to themselves. And I can't wait to hear what Cyndie has to say because I'm fascinated with everything about like spiritual that, learning about our ancestors. And I was telling Cyndie, I had a guest this past year who opened my eyes to the fact that we carry our ancestors' DNA. I mean, I knew it, but like how it affects me energy wise was like a total, oh my gosh, I want to know more about this. So when I met Cyndie in a group on Facebook, I was like, oh my gosh, you have to come on my podcast and talk to me. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So I love to hear the background, how people got into what they're doing. And I know with you, it came like when around 40, I think you
Yeah.
said. And so, and you're 47 now. So share, what led you there and what you've been doing to like educate yourself on this stuff. Cause I'm sure you didn't know it until you started learning about it.
Right.
Yeah.
So it really started with doing my genealogy research. I had kind of always been interested in family history, even as a kid. I knew a lot about my mom's side of the family. We lived in an area where, like, her ancestors from Scotland had settled this area in Ontario, and we still lived like half a mile from her grandfather's farm. And so I knew a lot about that side of the family. On the other hand, I knew absolutely nothing about my dad's side of the family. He had one brother who we saw occasionally. His parents lived in California, and I never met them. And he never really talked about them. The most I knew about them is that they were from England.
So you say you're from Pennsylvania. You live in Pennsylvania. Did you grow up in Canada?
Yes, I grew up
Okay.
in Ontario.
And did your parents meet in Canada?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So I always kind of felt like there was something missing inside me by not knowing that side of my family history. And, like who is that side of the family, and what do I get from them? So when I was about 40, I started doing my family tree, doing my genealogy research,
Hmm.
and I was fortunate to meet a half sister that my dad had,
Mm.
on his mom's side, who also lived in California. And she didn't really even know about my dad or our side of the family.
Oh, so she
So
was your half sister.
my dad's half
Oh, your
sister.
dad half sister. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So the
So
story
did
that
your dad didn't know of her until he was an adult or something?
he knew of her but had never met her.
Okay.
So what the story ended up being, when my dad was 19, he was living in Toronto with his family at that time. His parents split up, but separately, they both moved to California. And his mom had gone on to get married and had this daughter, and never really told her new husband or her daughter that she had two sons back in Canada.
Oh, wow. Well, he was 19, you said. So
Yeah.
he was kind of an adult, so she just kind of took off and then started over. Wow, that's she must have been really young when she had him.
Well, actually, she was somewhat old when she had her daughter. She was 48 years old.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because I was going to say 20 years later she basically had kids again.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. All
Yeah.
right, so how did you start this? You got interested in it. Did you go to an online source to learn more?
Um, where I started out, I did some work on ancestry.com. The reason we knew about this half sister is, back when I was a kid, we didn't get frequent letters from his mom, but at the one time we had got this picture with her and her daughter, and it said Mum and Sharon. So I knew what her name was. And through Facebook, I was able to track her down. And so we got in
Facebook's a
contact.
great source,
Yeah.
isn't it, for
Yeah.
finding yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So we corresponded a little bit. A year or two later, I went out to California and met her and met some of the family on my dad's father's side of the family. So between us all, we were kind of able to piece together this whole story of, what had happened in her life. And from that, I was able to learn more about, her family going back to England and the women that came before her, her mother and grandparents. And I was amazed to discover, like, things that they had gone through that I was also going through, like same behavioral patterns and relationship patterns, things happening at the same age that had happened to me. And I was like, this is unbelievable. So I really started to understand, like, there is that connection there. You always know that you have the physical DNA that shows up in you, but like, this was amazing to me to realize that, like, behaviors come from people that you've never even met. And even with my
And that might not
grandmother.
even exist anymore, right? Like,
Yeah.
that go back more than one generation.
And even with my grandmother on my dad's side, who I never met, like, just characteristics of myself that never really made sense with the rest of my family. I discovered I was a lot like her, and I'm like, now it makes sense. So it really did give me such a sense of identity of who I am and where I came from.
Yeah, I know that. So I have a cousin who was given up for adoption by my aunt when
Mhm.
she was young. And I knew of her because my parents were always honest with us, but like her mom had other kids and they never knew about her. So, but when she got to be 30, she found my aunt. And I just remember her saying that when she sat at the supper table with my aunt, it was like I never felt so connected to somebody like you got me. Whereas with her adopted parents, she said, I used to sit and make jokes at the dining room table and like they wouldn't laugh. And so there is this kind of there's these characteristics that are in your genes that really you don't even like you meet somebody and they're related to you and you just click,
Yeah.
that you don't have that sometimes with other people because you don't have a gene pool with them. So
Yeah.
I remember, I always will remember that story that she told because I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Having never been adopted, I don't know what that feels like.
Yeah. And I really clicked with my aunt in California when I met her. Like, it's like I've known her all my life. I just love her so much.
That's amazing. Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. So you did this research, then you started to get more curious, it sounds like, because you're now
Yeah.
very involved in what you do as a coach. So, yeah.
Well, a few years later, I think when I was about 45 or 46, I started to have a couple health problems. I was overweight, and rather than go on medication, I decided I was going to lose weight to, um, help improve these health problems. So I started going through a weight loss program, learned about emotional eating, and I started bringing that back to my family and things I'd learned as a child, and then I started looking at, like, my mom's side of the family, kind like, I knew the history, but then I started looking at some of the emotional stuff on her side of the family. So, again, I started looking at, what things she had gone through as a child, the things my grandmother had gone through in her life, and, kinda started understanding why we were the way we were. So I was really, um
Were there weight issues on that side of the family too? And what were the issues, I guess, emotionally manifesting as like kind of eating problems?
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, emotional difficulties, and my way of dealing with them was with food.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
I actually went on then to become trained in being an emotional eating coach. Then after I started working with a couple people, I realized, this isn't really how I wanna spend my days talking about food and what I ate and what I didn't eat, and so I kinda moved out of that, realm. Through that process, though, I started reconnecting with my spiritual side. It was something that I had been interested in as a kid. I was really into astrology and, like I said, things that I didn't feel fit in with my family. That was one of them.
Yeah, I would really want to dig into that a little bit because one of the things I believe is that we're really close to what our purpose when we're really small,
Yeah.
and then society and what we're supposed to do kind of
Yeah.
veers us off path. And it sounds to me like you almost had that third eye open. I think all children do, but like, how did society lead you to do something different than probably what you're meant to do, that you finally found your way back? And I love the whole story about you doing the emotional eating coaching because I think that you knew you wanted to help people
Yeah.
and it was just in a different way. But you kept you kept like trying to clear the fog. You kept like persevering into what that was and going back to what interested you, which was that
Right.
genealogy.
Yeah.
So what did you do? You said you were interested as a kid. What did you end up doing in the first half of your life?
I became a land use planner. So for over 20 years, I worked for local governments. So when
And how did you
people
get into that? Was it just because you were good at it in school, or did your dad or mom say, "Oh, you should do this," like my
No,
mother
it
said?
really was something that I wanted to do. I guess it also along the veins of helping people. I wanted to help create communities that were good places for people to live.
Mm.
So yes, I've been doing that for over 20 years now.
You know what? And this just struck me. When I think of land, I think of the history of
Yeah,
land, like who
yeah,
lived there before and who walked on that soil.
yeah,
And in a way, I see a tie there.
yeah. It is very ancestral also.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy. Okay, so you did that, then you decided emotional eating coach wasn't your real thing, but you started to get more in spiritual things, like what? What kind of spiritual things?
I mean, I've looked, it's kind of like breadcrumbs on a path. So it wasn't just one thing. It's like the more I learned about one thing, it would lead me to something else. So um, I've covered the gamut from chakra healing to Reiki to um,
Do you do crystals? Because crystals are and moon stuff. I know my daughter's really into the moon
I don't
cycles.
do a lot with crystals. I have
Okay.
some, but I don't work with them.
Yeah.
Um,
Like I'm thinking about, so 7 years ago would have been like 2013. So did you read The Secret?
I
Like
did
when,
read The Secret. Yep.
yeah. So that was a, like, for a lot of people, kind of a
Yep.
light bulb
Yep.
into kind of opening up. Oh my gosh, there's stuff that like is out there working for me and I didn't even realize it. How can I access that?
And one thing, I guess probably the biggest thing that led me back to the ancestry and connecting it with this spiritual is learning or hearing from psychic mediums. Like the first concept I had of this was reading Teresa Caputo's book, and she explains
Oh,
the
she's the Long Island
Island
medium.
medium.
Oh man, I didn't know she had a book. We'll have to put that in the show notes.
Got a couple now, I think.
Okay.
She explained this concept of what happens to your soul after you die, and how when you're here on the planet, you're on a soul path, and that there's lessons that you're meant to learn. And I've followed a couple other people that, once you hear an idea once, and then it starts showing up in other places, and I'm like, this makes sense to me now.
And
And
let me ask you this too, because I read a book that was really powerful. My daughter gave me, I think she gave it to me for Christmas a couple of Christmases ago, as um, and I've talked about it on the podcast before, but it's about case studies of life between lives. So
Mhm.
he was a hypnotist and he started to realize there was this pattern when people, he would talk about their past lives, that there was this thing that they did between lives, like this, kind of a soul enriching experience, like going back to school.
Soul review.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And so I have to get her book, because you know what, when I read that book, and I would love to know your take on when you read Teresa Caputo's books, I I've always been afraid of death. Humans, I think, are so afraid of death because it's like, that's it. And after I read his book, I think his name was Michael. He was a doctor. He's dead now, because I tried to find him. I was like, I want to go see him. But you know, what I realized is it's eternal.
Yep.
And I don't go to church. I was never raised with religion. So I never really had that exposure to the Bible and such. But what I got from that, it was a really religious experience reading that book, because I thought,
Mhm.
I don't fear death anymore.
Yep.
Like that was like such an eye opening. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. This is just one life where I'm learning my lessons. And I know this is a little like crazy woo woo for people, probably like, well, what is she talking about? But I love talking to somebody like you, because I feel like you kind of had that eye opening experience yourself, but
Yeah.
just with another book. So yeah. So did you, what did you feel like before? Did you have a religious upbringing? And when you got more into the spiritual, like how did that change you?
When I was younger, our family went to Presbyterian church, but I never really felt connection. And through the years, I've tried out other churches, and nothing really felt right for me. But yeah, getting into the spiritual stuff, it really started making sense for me. I'm like, this is something that I can believe in.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually got an email from somebody after I enrolled in my last, I have a, school where I
Mhm.
help people find their purpose. And I got an email from somebody who was clearly very religious. And she like said, well, it's clear that you are going further away from the Bible. And so she was very, clearly, her level, her experience, her lens was through her upbringing, her religion, the Bible was her book, right? And I find it very interesting that people, I found, and I had a very, very religious aunt, and to the extreme, and I think it turned my parents away from that, any kind of organized religion, and of course that filtered down to me. But I think, sometimes people are so focused on their way, they think it's the only way.
Mhm.
And while they preach this like, oh, I accept everybody because I go by the Bible. Well, are you really accepting me? Because I might think different, or I was raised different, or I just have a different experience.
Mhm.
And so it was just kind of interesting because I feel like I believe in God, and I feel like there's this connection, this source that we're all created from, but it's my version. It's my way of, accepting it and looking at it. And it seems like your experience was kind of similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I look at the Bible as being a collection of teachings of what was happening at that time that, those were written. But there's other teachings out there that are also
Yeah. How can
valid.
everything be wrong but
Yeah,
the Christian version, or because there's other religions, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, anyways, yeah, you were talking about how you got in more into spiritual.
Yeah, so, once I started getting that understanding of, the spiritual nature of our being here, I kind of related it back to the family history research. 'Cause from doing that, I was able like, I started seeing each of my ancestors as sort of a complete life history. So I saw each of them as a spirit who had come here, and they had lessons to learn, and they had gifts to share. And like you said, I didn't fear death anymore either. I just realized that we each have this journey that we're here for. And that really started getting me thinking of how to help other people learn this, and
And why
tying
you're here,
the
like, too,
genealogy
right?
and the spiritual work.
Yeah.
'Cause I also think that things that our ancestors had left unfinished, we take that on as part of our spiritual journey too. So it's like they've taken it to a certain point, and we then agree when we're coming here that we will help further that lesson along.
Interesting. I love that. So what have you learned that you need to carry on?
There's been a couple themes that have come up for me. One of them has been about rejection and abandonment. Yeah, I told the story about how my dad's parents moved, and even
Yeah.
though he was 19 years old, I think he carried that with him, that he did have a sense of abandonment. And I've even seen that show up in my own life now with my kids, thinking ahead. I'm 47 now, thinking ahead to the future. There's been times when I've just thought, no, I can't wait till my kids are out of here so I can go on and do something else. And it really brings me back to that. I'm like, no, I want better than what happened in my past. I have to keep, you know, keeping that relationship with them engaged.
Yeah, and you say he was 19 when she left? Well,
Yeah.
she was probably mentally gone before that, right? Because
Yeah.
this is not something that just happens overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so how old are your kids?
I have a daughter who's almost 21 and a son who's 17.
Okay. And what do they think about what you do with your ancestry healing work?
I think they respect it. My daughter is she's getting into the spiritual stuff too. So she's someone who I can really talk to, and she gets it when I talk to her about this stuff.
Don't
Um,
you wish you had it when you were 21?
oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. At least you're
Um,
learning it at a young age of 47 or even
yeah.
earlier, because now you know a lot of it. So yeah, so tell me what does your work do? How do you operate as a energy healer?
So right now, I mostly work one-on-one, very on a very limited basis. I've only worked with a handful of women. So as I said, I am working full-time job still.
Mhm.
This is actually something that helps me. My day-to-day work is very technical and very masculine oriented. I
Yeah.
deal with a lot of lawyers and developers and engineers, and the majority of whom are male. And after a while, I was really starting to feel like, you know, I wasn't able to be feminine and creative. So this is something also that gives me kind of that outlet, working with women and spending time with women on this kind of thing. Um, so
Yeah,
at
and
the
I love that as an example because a lot of people think, well, I can't leave my job and do something I'm passionate about. But
Yeah,
I started doing what I was passionate about on the side. And, I like dip your toe in the water first and see
Yeah, and
and
my
learn
husband and
that.
I have a plan to retire early, so early 50s. So
Good. That is early.
also, I wanted to get something started so that I have something to do.
So
You
do
know,
you help with the genealogy too? What
sorry?
do you help with the genealogy too? Because it sounds like you have a lot of experience doing that in your own family.
Yeah, so how I help women is looking at specifically the genealogy side and helping them recognize the patterns. And then I use energy therapy, well, not therapy, but energy healing modalities. So I've kind of come up with something I call ancestral EFT. So if you know what
Ooh.
EFT is, it's tapping through meridian points. So
Yeah, I just had somebody on the podcast a couple episodes ago who talked about that. So my listeners who have heard that episode will be familiar with it. Yes.
the process I came up with combines energy healing, chakra healing, and the ancestral. So what we do is connect with the ancestors or ancestresses, as I like to call the female ancestors, to call in their guidance and support in the healing session. And then we do the chakra tapping. So the regular EFT tapping, it's mostly from here up. So I do it
She
based on,
says shoulders, shoulders up to her head is what, because
yeah.
when this goes to audio, they won't see you. But yeah,
Oh,
yeah, shoulders to the head. Yeah.
so I actually use the 7 chakras to tap through. Um, and what I've learned from my research is a lot of the pain and patterns that were passed on from our ancestors, that negative energy gets stored in our chakras. And
Mm.
that can manifest then in our behaviors and actions. So by going through these healing modalities and the tapping, you can actually clear that ancestral energy and help it flow better, help your own energy flow better.
Mm. Yeah, and what are some results? Like what do people experience? I mean, do they just feel better as a result, or do they actually recognize ancestors like through the process? Probably different degrees of.
So typically we would focus on an issue that they're feeling blocked on to
Mm.
help them clear that block. So one of the big ones I like to work with, and this is based on my own experience of something I realized in myself, is that, one of the areas I get blocked all this time is not speaking up for myself. So not being assertive, not, putting my own needs aside to make other people happy. And that's something I really like to help other women with. So we look at where that came from our ancestresses, how they were blocked in speaking their truth. And then, after the tapping, then we do some coaching on how to, um, other ways to go about interacting and communicating and being a better communicator within the relationships in their life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I had a really weird experience and I don't know a lot about the chakras, so if you want to come back and we could do an episode on them, that would be really really fun. Because I don't think my audience might know what they are, but I was at an event and it was I had a little bit of a cold when I went to the event. It was actually, I think, the last trip I went on before COVID hit. And I went on this went to this event, and what came up for me during the event, my coach, who I'm in his mastermind group, and he has this event. So I'm with like my what do we call them? Like my business buddies. I call them business besties,
Is besties.
my
Yeah.
business besties, and so I, and we do these little hot seats where we're like at a table with 10 people, and it's like, what question do you want to ask the group? What do you need help with? And what was coming up for me was, it's time to quit my job. It's time to go all in with what I love doing, and the net will catch me. It was just all this like, I'm scared, but I know if that I feel aligned, and I know this is what I need to do. I lost my voice that week.
Mm,
And I'm somebody who never loses my voice, and I talk a lot. So when I lose my voice, it's like, eh! And somebody who is very spiritual was there. And he said to me, that's your throat chakra, because
Yep.
you're not doing what you should be doing. And I decided on the plane trip home that I was going to quit my job, and I did, and my voice came back. It was like so crazy. It was so crazy, but I never really related that I lost my voice to what I was going through and the decision I was making, and how that energy, like, it created a little bit of a health crisis in my
Mhm.
life, although temporary. But yeah, so I know that the chakras, I know they have different meaning and how they present themselves, but the throat is really using your voice, right?
Yep.
So I felt like I wasn't using my voice for good in the world like I was supposed to be. So it was being shut down.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I love that you help people do that. So I guess you part of it is kind of get kind of them understanding what chakras are.
Yeah, and I'm actually working on something right now that I'm hoping to be able to release in the next couple months, an actual group coaching program that will take them through learning how this ancestral energy gets stored in your body, doing the ancestral research, and working specifically with each chakra to clear each one.
Yeah, that is so amazing. Well, definitely come back, because we can talk about it and you can announce your program, because that would be amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So do what you do best, right? Go all in with it. Yeah. Yeah. So where would somebody start if they were like, okay, they heard you and they're like, this is really fascinating. Would you like, I can put Teresa's book links into the show notes so they can learn about what kind of you and I have learned about in these books that we've read. That would be kind of fun for them, probably.
Yeah,
So,
I can
yeah.
give you a couple others too.
Okay, great.
I'll give you the exact titles, but Sylvia Brown was another one,
Okay. Yeah,
and
I always like to inspire action. So any kind of action that they can take by listening to these nuggets of wisdom.
I forget the author's name, but the book was called Seat of the Soul, and
Ooh,
that's a very, very popular book in, the spiritual development arena.
got it. Got it. And what would you say to somebody who, like, does have like, religiously goes to church every Sunday, but then their interest is still, it's not like going against their religion, right? I mean, I guess I don't understand why somebody would resist this, because I think it aligns perfectly with religion.
From what I understand, in some religions, they don't believe in past life theory.
Mm, okay.
I think we only have this one lifetime. So
Oh,
that is one area where people might get stuck on that.
how sad.
Well, I think we all come here at different levels, and
Yes. Yes.
some people are not in the level of their soul progression that they understand
Yes.
that yet.
Yes. I first learned about this from Oprah, and I have to laugh because I mention her a lot, because I did not
I
have
love
this
it too.
religious upbringing, and I liked where I learned The Secret, and I learned about Eckhart Tolle's books, and um but I remember her talking about souls and old souls and stuff. And then
Yep.
when I read this book, the case studies of life between lives, he said that a lot of people, when they come to him, they think they're older souls than they are. And I thought that was really funny, because, like, you probably wouldn't need a hypnotist if you're an older soul, right? So I thought that was quite funny. But yeah, so, and I like, when I talk to people, and sometimes I think about, like, where they are in their soul development. Do you do that too?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's really helped me relate to people better, understanding that they are a soul, and whatever they're reflecting back to me isn't a reflection on me. It's what their soul is going through right now and where they are in their journey. So it really
So
helps me
true.
have
Yeah.
more compassion for people.
Yeah, and you can sometimes see old souls in children.
Yep.
Like, you can tell a child when a child is super advanced. And like I said, I think they're more connected too. And then that starts to disappear as they get older and brainwashed by society into, like, what society expects
Absolutely.
of them. Yeah. having just had my sixth grandchild, I look at him and I think, oh, he's just like so connected to everything. And
It's
now we're
kind of
going to ruin
sad.
him.
They come into the world and they're perfect, and
Yes. Yeah.
it's when they've lived with society that all these ideas get put in their head that, they're not good enough and they need to do better, and,
Yeah.
it's sad.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what is one thing that you would like to leave the listeners with? One thing that you would like to say as you're like 47 and looking ahead? What do you hope for in your life, and what piece of nugget advice would you give them as they head into their second half of life?
I know there's a lot out there in the world that, 50 is the end of the world, and I absolutely don't believe that at all. I am so excited to move into this phase of life. I think this is when, we get to take everything we've learned up to now, our wisdom, and put it into action. This is our time to really become who we were meant to be.
Yes. Yes, I love that. I'm in a group, and I've been in this it's a business group on, video messaging, and somebody just joined it, and she posted that she's 74 and she feels like, well, should I really do this? She was questioning whether she should join. Should I really do this? Because I'm not even sure how much time I have left. And I
None of
like
us do.
I know a 24-year-old can have one day left, but I offered some support to her, but and then I'm thinking, like, wouldn't you rather be doing what you love, not knowing how much time you have left, rather than doing what you hate and knowing you have X number of years to do that? I mean, it's just like no brainer to me. So I love the fact that she took the plunge at 74, and somebody else said 70 is the new 50. It's like, I like that. Yeah.
And I
So,
always like to have people think about when they're at the end of their life, hopefully it'll be 85 or 90 years old. When they look back, do they want to have regrets about the things they wish they'd done and they didn't?
yes, no
So this is
regrets.
time to
And
do it.
yeah, and you actually studies show when you're connected and aligned and love what you're doing, you live longer. So if
I've
you want to live with more vitality and longer, then stop doing what isn't making you happy and start finding out what will make you happy, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
We
So
were
I'd
all
love to
meant for joy.
yes, yes. So I'd love to support you as you roll out this great program. It sounds like it's unique and of high value, and yeah, can't wait to hear more about it.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Not Your Average Lives podcast. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe on iTunes if you have an Apple device. You can find free resources and learn what else I have going on at the moment that might interest you on my website at notyouraveragegrandma.com. You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook at Not Your Average Grandma. If you liked this episode, it would make my heart so happy if you could leave me a 5-star rating. You can also add a review to let me know what you like about this podcast, which will help spread the word about it to others who need a little midlife inspiration. As always, be you, listen to your inner voice, and focus on reigniting that lost spark so you can start living your own, not your average life.